Have you ever stopped to think that the world you see today, everything from the borders on a map to the stories we tell ourselves, might still be shaped by empires that officially vanished a long, long time ago? Well, today we're going to dive into post-colonial theory. Think of it as a special lens that helps us see all the hidden legacies of colonialism that are still, believe it or not, all around us.
You know what I'm talking about. You look at a map of Africa and see those incredibly straight borders, and you think, that's kind of weird. Or you wonder why some parts of the world have so much and others have so little. Well, these things aren't just random accidents of history. They're like echoes from the past. And post-colonial theory, it gives us the tools to finally hear those echoes clearly.
And if we want to understand those echoes, we've got to start at the source. We have to go back and stand in the long, long shadow of empire and look at the systems of power it built.
Okay, so first things first. Let's get two really important terms straight: imperialism and colonialism. Think of it like this. Imperialism is the big idea, the blueprint. It's the grand policy of a country saying, we want to be more powerful and extend our influence. Colonialism, on the other hand, is the actual on-the-ground construction project. It's the practice of sending people to settle that land, to control it, and to drain its resources for the benefit of the mother country. One's the idea. The other is the often messy and brutal reality.
But here's the thing. This control wasn't just about politics or money. No, it went way deeper than that. It actually worked its way inside people's heads, inside the colonial mind. And to really get a handle on that psychological damage, we need to meet one of its sharpest critics.
And that critic was a man named Franz Fanon. Now, Fanon was a psychiatrist from Martinique, which was a French colony. So this guy wasn't just some academic in an ivory tower. He lived it. He experienced colonialism firsthand. And his groundbreaking book, Black Skin, White Masks, is just this searing, first-hand account of the psychological harm that comes from living under the constant dehumanizing stare of a colonizer.
And he brings this feeling to life with this absolutely gut punch of a real-life moment. He talks about being on a train, and a small child sees him, points, and yells out, "Look! A Negro! Mama, see the Negro! I'm frightened!" Fanon writes that in that single instant, he wasn't a man, he wasn't a doctor, he wasn't a person anymore. He just became an object of someone else's fear.
Fanon gave this feeling a name. He called it objectification. It's that awful, sinking feeling of being forced to see yourself not as you are, but through the prejudiced eyes of the person in power. You're no longer a person. You're a stereotype. And you can imagine, right, the deep internal battle that creates, trying to just hold on to who you are when the world is telling you you're something else.
Okay, so Fanon shows us the internal damage, what it felt like on the inside. But how is a system like this justified on the outside? I mean, how did colonial powers even create these ideas of the other to begin with? Well, for that, we have to turn to another giant of post-colonial thought, Edward Said.
Said's answer to that question came down to one single powerful idea: Orientalism. His whole point was that the West didn't just discover the East. No, he argued it literally invented a place called the Orient. It used its art, its books, and its academics to paint this picture of Eastern societies as being mystical and irrational and exotic and underdeveloped. It was a story, a fiction, that, conveniently enough, made it seem perfectly natural for the West to dominate them.
And Said breaks down how this invention actually becomes real, kind of in 3 steps. First, it starts out as an academic subject, something you study at a university. Then, that way of thinking bleeds out into the culture and creates a really simple way of seeing the world. You've got the logical West and the exotic East. And finally, that whole mindset gets baked into the actual powerful institutions, the governments, the armies, the corporations that were designed to rule over this place they called the Orient. And we're not talking about subtle stuff here. Said points to a whole library of stereotypes that just kept showing up again and again in Western culture. These caricatures took incredibly complex societies, billions of people, and boiled them down to these simple, demeaning cartoons. And when you do that, it makes it a whole lot easier to argue that they need us to come in and civilize them or control them. So these weren't just harmless fictions in old books. They had huge, real-world consequences.
Okay, so we've talked about the colonizers' gaze and the cultural stories they wrote. But what about the people who were just completely written out of the story? The folks whose experiences were ignored not just by the colonizers, but by their own local, powerful elites, too.
This is where the theorist Gayatri Spivak comes in. And she gave these people a name, the subaltern. It's a term for the people who are so far in the margins of society that their voices just get completely drowned out. We're talking about people at the very bottom of the ladder. Think rural peasants, indigenous communities, and especially women, whose histories were basically erased from all sides.
And this leads Spivak to ask this really profound and frankly pretty unsettling question. And listen carefully to the words here. She doesn't ask, could the subalterns speak? I mean, of course they could. They talked, they lived, they had full lives. The question is, can the subaltern speak? As in, is it even possible for us, now, to truly hear their authentic voice through all the layers of power and history that have worked for so long to bury it?
And her answer is, well, it's pretty skeptical. She argues that even when a well-meaning intellectual comes along today and tries to rescue or give voice to the subaltern, they just can't be a clear window. They can't help but filter that experience through their own language, their own privilege. So in the very act of trying to represent these lost voices, we risk accidentally speaking over them, twisting their reality all over again. It's a powerful warning that some histories, they might just be lost to us for good.
So, wow, where does all of this leave us today? If our history books, our universities, our whole way of knowing things is so tangled up in this colonial legacy, what do we do about it? Well, that's the central question driving a really important modern project called decolonizing knowledge.
And this idea is starting to shake up entire fields of study. You have scholars like Ali Megji, for instance, who argue that a discipline like sociology absolutely has to take a long, hard look in the mirror. Because let's be honest, it was born right in the middle of the Age of Empire, and you can't just pretend that history didn't shape its most basic ideas.
But let's be really clear here. This doesn't mean we just throw out all the influential Western thinkers. That's not the goal. The goal is to provincialize them. I love that word. It just means we need to recognize that the European viewpoint is exactly that, one important viewpoint from one part of the world. It's not the universal default for all of humanity. The real idea is to put all these different traditions into conversation with each other, so we can finally start to get a fuller, more honest picture of the world.
So we want to leave you with a kind of challenge, a new mental habit to take with you. The next time you watch a movie, read a history book, or even just scroll through the news, just stop for a second and ask yourself, whose story am I hearing right now? And, maybe even more importantly, whose story am I not hearing? Answering that question, that's the first step to seeing the world and all the power that shapes it with brand new eyes.